So, you've broken down your monologue on the page. You've identified your most important words. You've identified your line endings. You make sure that you understand what every single word it is that you're saying means. You know what your character is going through. You know who they're talking to. You know what's going on in the scene. Great. Now, the added layer. How do you use the language? Like, really use the language. Because if you go back and you look at some of the other videos that we've already watched of previous competitors, there's something about the way that those student performers speak that's so relaxed, it's so confident, it's so natural, and also still so captivating. And part of it is not just that they know what they're doing up here, and not just that they know how to perform what the character's going through, it's also because they know how to use the words to help tell the story, and also to help communicate the character. So, taking the opening monologue from Henry V as an example. Vowels and consonants. In theater, we often talk about how vowels contain emotion and consonants communicate intelligence, and that's sometimes true, but the truth is it's not that simple, right? Because a good, powerful consonant can contain quite a lot of emotion, right? It's why so many words like, bite have such an emotional impact, not just the verbal impact of the meaning of the word. So, we practice articulation and vocal exercises so that you know, as an actor, how can I control my words to communicate what my character is feeling. For example, if you have a monologue, let's say a monologue of Juliet's, where she is considering whether or not she's going to drink the potion, whether or not the friar is setting her up. She has multiple big O's in the monologue, right? Like, oh my God, like, oh no, what if this, what if that? Well, you can't just say, oh, I hope the friar is not trying to kill me, right? The O has poetry in it. It has power. Oh God, what if, right? Like, but you have to be able to know that. You have to recognize it and you have to use it. So, this monologue starts with a big fat O. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention! A kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. Now, if that seemed extra to you, and you're like, wow, this goes really... Yeah, because it's Shakespeare. There's no such thing as understated Shakespeare. There is just Shakespeare at his level and everything else that hasn't gotten there yet. Okay? So if you're sitting there and you're like, oh, I don't know if I can be that big. Yes, you can. It just requires the practice and understanding really what's going on. The last layer, and this is going to be one of the major focuses of this week's rehearsal, is energy. The character's energy and urgency. Shakespeare never wrote a character that didn't have something going on. And all of these monologues, all of them, have some kind of urgency in them. Whether it's, in the case of my example monologue, I need you guys to pay attention because this is going to be so awesome. I just need you to go with it, okay? That's my character's urgency. If you're playing Hamlet, it's, oh my God, if I don't figure this out, I am going to throw myself off of the castle battlements because I need to know what's going on. If you're playing Romeo, it's, oh my God, I love this girl so much, I have no idea what I'm going to do without her. If you're playing Viola in Twelfth Night, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm in the middle of this mess. I'm in love with my boss. This other crazy lady's in love with me because she thinks I'm a guy, but I'm not a guy. I'm a girl, and I'm in love with my boss, but he thinks I'm a guy too, and it's really confusing, right? Everybody, all of Shakespeare's plays always live at a 10 out of 10 emotionally. Their circumstances are always big. So you've got to be big to match. You're not going to get there overnight. It's going to take practice. It's going to take imagination. It's going to take what would I do if it were me? How would I feel? How would I feel? What would I do? What would I think? What would I want? That's the part of being an actor that brings yourself to the role and personalizes your performance. So, now, let's go back and let's talk about language a little bit more. Listen to the way in which I'm going to say some of these lines, and the what it first is going to sound like I'm overdoing the language. I'll set up like a more normal reading of it, and then I'm going to Shakespeareize it. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, and you're already bored, aren't you? Because of course you are. Because I'm not in it, right? I'm just sort of saying the words, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and I'm not really particularly using the language. But pay attention to the consonants. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. A kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Now, I would also never get on stage and do it quite that big, because that sounds phony. But I'm not on stage yet. I'm practicing, I'm rehearsing, and that means that I'm going to try different things on my way to figuring out where do I want to live. In the spectrum of too much versus not enough, I'm going for there, right? And that only comes with practice and investigation. Play with the words, play with the language. I'll be able to tell in your rehearsal videos whether or not you really are trying to do that or not. And if you are, even if you're not perfect, I don't care. You don't need to be perfect yet. You're never going to get to perfect. But play around with it. See what happens. Feel silly. It's okay. You're playing pretend. It's okay to feel silly when you're playing pretend. If you go too far, I'll tell you. If you're not going far enough, I'll tell you. All right? Good luck.